So good morning, everyone. I'm Shanti, and I'm one of the SAPEX directors, and I'm here to welcome you all to our SMME development webinar series. This is number 3 in the series, and the focus we have right now is on developing supply chain skills within the SMME arena of business, as it were. So we realize the corporates have got some really good development programs in place, but there's definitely been a gap in terms of the small businesses and their supply chain skills and their knowledge. So this is really a fantastic opportunity whereby SAPEX is partnering with various individuals and organizations to bring you some supply chain material that is useful and user-friendly for your small and medium-sized business. And Ken, who is on the call, will be doing the presentation today. Ken is a seasoned SAPEX representative, past president of SAPEX and director, and if those of you who don't know him, the demand-driven expert within the SAPEX community. So I'd like to welcome Ken. Those of you who are with corporates, this is not going to be useful to you, but I think it's quite important that you also consider your supplier development programs and things like that, because it is an opportunity for you in the future to perhaps bring some of them on board, those organizations that you are developing within your supplier development and enterprise development programs. So Ken, over to you. I will keep an eye on the questions, and at the end, I will help Ken in terms of facilitating those questions. So if anyone does have a question, please use the chat function. Thanks, Ken.
Yes, thanks, Shanti. And well, in Cape Town, it's a good afternoon. You welcomed everybody to a good morning there, I think, Shanti, did you?
Sorry, I've been dealing with America all week. They're ahead of us, behind us.
That's a good excuse, a good excuse. Okay, so it's a beautiful day in Cape Town, so I thought I'd take my helicopter up this afternoon and broadcast from a helicopter. So I think this is the first hot day we've had in Cape Town for a long time, so it's really beautiful here today. So today we're going to be talking about inventory replenishment. We're going to be going through a summary really of a particular course that we've got, which is available to our SMME members, and just give you an idea of the sort of things that you need to be thinking about, the sort of things you need to be looking at, the sort of things you need to understand if you want to make a good job of inventory replenishment. And I think one of the most important things about inventory is that inventory is the lifeblood of your business. Whether you're a distributor or a manufacturer and distributor, inventory is your lifeblood. It is your business. Inventory is your business, and the flow of inventory into and out of your business is very important. And the speed of that flow is very important as well. So I always say that the people you have looking after your inventory should be the best educated, best trained, most empowered, and probably the most highly paid people within your organization, because inventory is typically the largest asset that you have in your business, and you need to have these good people looking after that major asset. So let me see if I can get this going here. Oops. So we're going to be talking about a course which is available called the Inventory Team Leader, and I'm just going to be going through some of the material that's available in this course, just to give you an idea of the sort of things that you should know about. So what is the main objective of inventory management? Well, we've got a little definition here. Inventory management can be described as a method used for organizing, holding, and replenishment of stock, with the main goal to keep the inventory at an optimal level without stockouts and excesses. Now, it's very important about that optimal level, because inventory is an investment in your business and you want to get a return on that investment. If you have too little, you are probably expediting more stock in, which is costing you money. And if you have too much, you've now spent money on something that you're not going to get a return on. So getting that optimal level is pretty important, isn't it? So the role of inventory replenishment, then, we need to manage inventory levels properly. We need to identify those items that are excess or items that are obsolete or past their sell-by date and get them out of the system because they just clutter up the system. We need to have good measurements of inventory, monitor your inventory in measurements and ensure having the right goods are available at the right time. Accurate information is absolutely crucial, and it's important that you know exactly what you have and exactly where it is in real time. And I always tell people that your inventory records in your system should be like your bank account, 100% accurate and real time. And that's very important because people are going to be looking in the system and looking at what inventory you have and making business decisions. And if the inventory records are incorrect or they're late or past due, then you're going to get people making the wrong business decisions. And of course, at the end of the day, we need to be able to meet the demand out there in the marketplace as well. But there are lots of different types of inventory that we find within our supply chains, within our manufacturing plants, within our distribution networks, and they can be broken down into raw materials. These are coming into your manufacturing plant at the right time, such that they can be issued into work in process in the factory. And we have the right amount of materials coordinated together so that we can assemble the products that we require. We may even have semi-finished products or intermediate items. So we might make sub-assemblies and keep them in a store somewhere ready for use in the manufacturing process. But at the end of the day, we're going to have goods ready for sale. We're going to have finished goods sitting in our warehouse, which we either need to get out to our customers, or they may be going out into a retail network. Consumables for production and MRO items. Yes, we need a lot of things to keep the wheels of industry turning, but they shouldn't end up in our finished product. MRO items, those maintenance, repair, and operating supplies, all those spare parts we need for the machines, the supplies we need in our offices, cleaning materials, tea, coffee, and toilet rolls, all form part of those MRO supplies. And again, we need to make sure that we have sufficient of them to keep industry running and turning. So what are some of the objectives of the inventory that we've got? We want to be able to provide what the customers want. So it's not what we think the customers might need in the future, but what do the customers actually need? And if we don't have it, we can have lost sales. Now, lost sales mean that we lose the profit on that particular sale. But if it happens too often, then we might lose the customer. And we probably won't know that until further down the road. So availability on shelf for most items is incredibly important, isn't it? We want to prevent holding of incorrect inventory. So we need to have the right inventory at the right place at the right time. And also to prevent damaged inventory and customer returns. Inventory can get damaged very easily if we don't look after it properly. And when it comes to customer returns, I usually find this is where we make quite a few mistakes. We have some pretty good processes for getting materials down the supply chain to the customer, but once they start coming back, the processes we have generally are not very good, and we try and make it up as these things come back. And often a lot of mistakes are made in that area. So it's an area that I think a lot of companies could focus on a little bit better. And don't forget, it's not only sending material back because it was the wrong material or it's poor quality, but we should be getting more and more materials being returned for recycling, reuse, remanufacture, etc. And I think that's going to become a much larger portion of the supply chain. So we need to match the supply with demand. We don't want to have too much inventory, and on the other hand, we don't want to have too little. So finding that right balance of having the right amount is very challenging indeed. And if you look at the supply chain down the bottom here, we have both internal and external supply chains. So on the left-hand side, we've got our suppliers here. We're providing them with information. Are we providing them with relevant information about what we need now and in the future? Because if we don't give them relevant information, we're probably not going to get relevant materials coming into our organization when we need them. And then within the organization itself, once we receive those materials, they're going to flow through processes within our organization. And we need to make sure that those processes are working properly and efficiently as well. But then on the other side, we have more external supply chains. We have our customers. Those customers could be direct customers that we're selling to. They could be distribution centers, which are distributing to retail outlets, etc. And again, information is going to be key, relevant information, and getting relevant materials out to those customers. So you're sitting in your company in the middle here. It's very important that you have good friends in the supply chain, because you can make the best product in the world, but if you can't get the right materials to manufacture it, and you can't get it out to your market through the distribution supply chains, then you're really wasting your time, aren't you? So make sure you're dealing with the best people in the supply chain. I always say your company is only as good as your suppliers. If you've got lousy suppliers, you're going to be a lousy company. So make sure you deal with the best, and that's not necessarily the cheapest. So what functions affect inventory in our organization? Well, procurement for starters. If they're not buying the right materials at the right time, then that's going to affect our manufacturing processes or distribution processes. Production planning is very important, because if we don't plan to build the right materials or the right products at the right time, we're going to have shortages out in the supply chain. Manufacturing, very important. Manufacturing is probably the most important part of the supply chain, because it's here where we make our money. We don't make money anywhere else in the supply chain. The rest of the supply chain costs us money. But in manufacturing, we're taking raw materials and adding value to those raw materials. So this is the only place in the supply chain where we actually only add value. So manufacturing is an incredibly important part of the supply chain, and we need to make sure that the materials are available for them, and those materials are the right quantity and specifically the right quality as well. Distribution is going to affect inventory, isn't it? Having the right materials going through that distribution supply chain and making sure those materials flow through that supply chain as well. Because another important part is inventory only has value when it's moving. As soon as it stands still anywhere, it gathers dust and it gathers cost. So we must try and keep inventory moving as much as possible. After sales service can affect inventory as well. We might need spare parts. When you take your car down to be serviced every 15,000 kilometers, we expect that those parts are going to be available so that they can do the service for you. Finance and management can have an effect on inventory. Typically management by the policies that they might put in place. And I've come across a couple of companies in my time where management has said, oh, we have too much inventory. Let's take out all the safety stock. I mean, what a crazy policy to put in place. But they've done it. And of course, it hasn't done the company any good at all. So sometimes management with their policies affect inventory. Security and risk. Well, yes, we need to keep our inventory secure. I always say to people, if you've got a desirable product, somebody is plotting to take it away from you at this very moment in time. And we need to make sure that inventory is secure in our warehouses and in our stores and in our supply chains. Very important. And also we have that risk. As soon as we have inventory, we have risk. We have risk that it could get damaged. There could be a flood, there could be a fire, it could get stolen. So there's a lot of risks. It could become obsolete. Health and safety is another issue here as well, particularly when we're dealing with products that are hazardous in some way. We need to make sure that people understand how to look after these hazardous materials. And what happens when there's a spill or there's damage? What do they do? And I've seen some horrific issues where, you know, like a drum of printing ink fell off a truck at a receiving bay, and the guy's got the hose out and hosed it down the drain, which got into the Strait and the river. And it cost that company a fortune to go and clear that up. But nobody had told them how to handle these products. Efficient space utilization is important as well. Making sure that in your warehouses you have a place for everything and everything is in its place. So housekeeping is incredibly important. I hate to see things lying all over the floor. And then quality control, of course, making sure that what materials are coming in are of the right quality. So a lot of functions within the business have an effect on our inventory. Value of inventory. I think it's important for the people looking after inventory in our warehouses that they understand the value of it. If it was money piled up on the shelves there, they could very easily see what the value is that they're looking after. But I've seen people drop things on the floor and then kick them under the rack or throw them in the bin because they don't know what they are. And it could be a sort of 100 Rand component. Whereas if a 100 Rand note had fluttered off the shelf, they would see the value in that. So it's important that people see the value of the things they're looking after and the total value that they're looking after as well. So it's very important also measuring inventory as well. We'll come to that a little bit later. And then inventory valuation. How do we value inventory in the supply chain and the cost of goods sold? So if we look at valuing inventory, there are really two ways of looking at it. We can either look at the number of items that we've got and multiply it by the cost of that item. So there would be something like a raw material that's come in. I bought it for 10 Rands and I've got 1,000 of them, you know, therefore I've got 10,000 Rands worth of inventory in that. Or I might look at, maybe it's a finished product. I might look at how many I've got and what the market value is. But typically we would use the cost of goods sold in that case and value the inventory at the cost of goods sold, not of what we can get for it out in the marketplace. Because ultimately you may not be able to sell it. It may become obsolete. We may have to devalue it and maybe get rid of it. So lots of materials and different ways in which we might value them. But as I said before, I think it's important that the people who work in your warehouses understand the value of what they're looking at. So holding inventory is quite a cost. And let's have a look at some of these here. We've got the cost of capital. I'm now having to expend money to go out and buy this inventory. So there's that lost opportunity cost. Let's say I've got R1 million and I'm going to decide what to do with it. Well, I could go and buy some inventory, or possibly I could go and invest that R1 million somewhere else and get a better return. So I said it's got the cost of capital here, which let's say in South Africa, let's say we go and borrow some money, it might cost us, 10% to borrow money from the bank. But if I've got R1 million, I don't want a return of 10%. I want a higher return. Maybe I can invest it on the stock exchange or cryptocurrencies or a friend's business down the road and get 20 or 25% return on that money. So therefore, it's all about the lost opportunity cost. So when you're looking at holding cost of inventory, don't just look at the cost of borrowing that money from the bank. Look at the lost opportunity cost, where you could have invested it somewhere else and got a better return. Space. is expensive. Every square meter in your warehouse is costing you money, and we need to make sure that we're getting the best use out of that space as well. There's administration costs. Okay, in the warehouse, we've got heating, lighting, there's office space required. There's a portion of your computer system so we can track the inventory in and out of the system. And of course, we need labor, and the labor needs to have benefits and needs tea, coffee, and toilet rolls. And so there's a lot of cost there. Depreciation and obsolescence costs. Okay, if material becomes obsolete or it goes past its sell-by date and I have to throw it away, there are costs involved there. If I've got several million rands worth of stock sitting in a warehouse, then I better have insured it. Okay, because if there is a tragedy like a flood or a fire or something, I need to make sure that that cost or that investment is insured. We also need materials handling. Now, materials handling doesn't only include things like forklift trucks and pallet trucks, but it also includes racking. We need to have the right racking for the right products that we're holding. We need to have the right materials handling equipment to move that material around, to receive it in the first place, and then issue it out to where it has to go to. And there's a lot of robotics and a lot of automated materials handling equipment coming into warehousing these days. So there's quite a lot of cost there. The lead time for your parts is significant because if you're buying parts that have exceedingly long lead times, it means you're probably going to be carrying a lot more of that stock to cover that lead time. And so that can have an issue on the amount of stock that you're going to be carrying. Shrinkage. Well, I don't like to call it shrinkage. I call it theft because that's exactly what it is. And if you don't have a good security in your warehouse, as I mentioned before, if you've got desirable products, somebody is plotting to take it away from you. And one of the courses I've run over the years is one on inventory accuracy. Security is a big issue there. And I collect stories of how clever people are that work in warehouses, and the way they get stuff out of warehouses is like unbelievable. And then there's the delay of innovation here. If we've got a lot of stock, I've got to actually use that up before I can maybe bring in some new stock which has got a better innovation to it. So a lot of costs involved there in holding inventory. We mentioned the cost of goods sold, and typically we look at valuing inventory in our finished goods warehouse using a cost of goods sold. And the cost of goods sold is how much did it cost me to manufacture that product and get it into the finished goods warehouse. And typically we look at the direct costs of doing that and the fixed costs. What are the fixed costs? Well, the variable costs. What are the variable costs? Well, material is a variable cost. But typically in a manufacturing plant, labor in the short term is not a variable cost, it's fixed. Whether you've got anything for the guys on the factory to do today or not, you're still paying them. In the long term, labor is a variable cost because I can change the amount of labor that I have, either increase it or decrease it. But in the short term, I can't. So typically, the cost of goods sold would include the direct material costs, the variable costs, and a portion of the utilities and expenses, the admin costs in the factory. Customers. Well, we have two types of customers, don't we? We have external and internal. External customers are going to be those people we're selling our finished product to, or the distribution supply chain that's taking our products. But don't forget the internal customers as well. And in a manufacturing plant, the main internal customer is your factory. And remember, the factory is where you make your money. It's the only place we create wealth in the supply chain. So we need to make sure that we are providing our factory with the best customer service possible. And when it comes to customer service, it's not just about customer satisfaction. It really is about customer delight. If you have a satisfied customer, there's a chance they might get wooed away for a 5-cent discount or a 5% discount with another company down the road. But if you've got a highly delighted customer, they will stick with you thick and thin. So make sure your customers are highly delighted. Just go that little extra mile for them. You know, I once talked about this at with some guys in a warehouse, and they said, you know what, we always buy our spare parts from Switzerland. And I said, why is that? They said, well, every time they arrive, we open the crate, and there on the top is a box of Swiss chocolates. We won't buy our spare parts from anywhere else. Now, what did that cost that company that was providing those spare parts? A box of chocolates. Come on. I mean, it's worth nothing, really, in the bigger scheme of things. But these guys are highly delighted to get their box of chocolates. So maybe just think along those sort of lines. So when it comes to customer service, we must always, I think, first of all, measure it. Because I often go to companies and I say, customer service? Oh, yes. So what's your customer service measure? And they say, well, actually, we don't measure it. I said, well, why are you in business? Oh, to satisfy customers. Well, how do you know whether you're doing a good job or not? And in many cases, people are not doing such a great job. And I think that's one of the reasons they don't like measuring it, because they don't like to know how bad they are. But first of all, start measuring your customer service, but understand what the customers require, okay, as far as service is concerned. Sometimes we think we know what the customers want, but actually go and talk to the customer, listen to the voice of the customer. What is the customer actually after? And then make sure that we're providing that service. Obviously, quality is a given today. It used to be part of the customer service issue. But today, we expect to get a quality product. We expect to get a product that does what they say it does. But flexibility can be a very important customer service requirement. How flexible are we with regards to our customer? Can we change the product slightly, or can we change the quantities or the timing or whatever? How flexible are we? That could be important. Shorter lead times are always important. If we can reduce the time to do anything, that is absolutely critical in the supply chain. So never, ever increase your lead times. Always work on shortening them. And then lower costs as well. But it's not necessarily about cost. It's about giving the customer value. And then we've got reliability and availability of supply. And that's pretty important, that we need to have that availability on shelf, particularly in fast-moving consumer goods, because if your product is not on the shelf and the customer needs something, they're going to find something similar. So it's very important that you have that availability on shelf. So reliability is very important in the supply chain as well. So what about the 5 rights? So we need to make sure that we have the right quality and the right quantity of products in the right place, at the right time, and at the right price as well. Make it easy for your customers to lay their hands on your product, and always make sure they are there, because it's very frustrating if you go to a store and you're looking for something specific and they've run out of stock again. Okay, it can be quite frustrating for the customers. Inventory manufacturing, very important. Again, the 5 rights apply here as far as the raw materials and components and parts we need to build our product. But how do we know how many we need? Well, we have a bill of materials, and you can see on the slide here, there's a bill of materials for a bicycle. I'm sure bicycles are a little bit more complicated than this, but it just gives you an idea of what a bill of materials perhaps looks like. So to build one bicycle, I need handlebars and I need a frame assembly, and the frame assembly is made up from wheels and a frame, etc. So we can determine that we want to build, say, 100 bicycles, and I can explode down through the bills of materials, and it'll tell me exactly how many parts I need to build 100 bicycles. And then I can make sure that those materials are available at the right time when we decide to build our batch of 100 bicycles. So we have a master production schedule which says we're going to build bicycles in these time periods, and these are the quantities we're going to build. And exploding that through the bills of materials gives us an idea of exactly what we need to build those bicycles in those time periods, and making sure that we have all the materials arriving at the right time so we can put the product together. Technology is playing a huge part in inventory and inventory management and inventory replenishment. Typically, most companies have what we call an ERP system, an enterprise resource planning system, which is basically the core system for your business. It's where you would probably have your purchase orders, your manufacturing orders, your customer orders, your bills of materials and routines, etc. And you would have some form of inventory management, but it's just a core system where we keep all our major databases, in other words. But you could need something more specific or more more specific or more complex for what you might need. If you're really into warehousing, you're probably going to need, say, a warehouse management system, which gives you a lot more functionality than perhaps a basic ERP system. If you're into transportation, you're probably going to need a transportation management system integrated into your ERP system so that you can manage your transportation. So quite often people have this core ERP system and then go and look for best of breed software which they can hook into their ERP system, which does specific jobs, for example. I know I worked with a refinery at one stage, and they had a core ERP system, but they had about 12 or 13 best of breed software around the outside, which did specific jobs that they required. Because a basic ERP system is not much good for planning an oil refinery. So you need specific tools to do that properly. And then, of course, we've got electronic data interchange, being able to communicate up and down our supply chain rapidly and accurately and timely as well. And then, of course, we've got all the tools like barcoding, scanners, and RFID, radio frequency identification, things that we can use to speed up and make the processes more accurate. And we see already there's a lot more robotics coming in to warehousing and distribution, and even using drones at night to go and count the stock, make sure that the stock is accurate. Which brings me on to the next subject, which is the quality of data. Now, this is absolutely crucial. As Shanti mentioned in the beginning there, I'm quite involved in the demand-driven materials requirements planning and implementing systems with regards to demand-driven. And guaranteed, every time we go in and try and implement a system, data is a big issue. People don't focus on their data, on the accuracy of their data. For example, recently working with a company, and they've got like 60% past due orders in their manufacturing system. They've got 30% purchase orders are past due. Now, planning systems can't handle a past due date, but nobody goes in and fixes these things. And when you go and look at the bills of materials, they're not right. And inventory records are not accurate. It's very important that management focuses on the quality of data. Put in the right metrics to make sure that your data is accurate. And as I mentioned earlier, I think your system, your ERP system, should reflect exactly what is happening in the real world in real time, okay? So if I look into the system and it says X, when I go down to the factory floor, it actually says, hey, that's exactly what's in the system. So it has to be like your bank account, 100% accurate and real time. When you look in your bank account, you know exactly what money you have or you don't have in all your accounts and credit cards and what have you. And that's real time. Because when you go to the ATM and you ask for some money, put your card in there, you hear the machine going, but before you've even got the cash out of the slot, you've got a message on your cell phone telling you somebody's taken money out of your account. That's how the record should be in your business, okay? And that is something that needs to be worked on. So accurately recording movements of materials, very important. Having good master data records, having the correct configurations in your system as well. And looking at the data performance, having metrics there. How accurate are your bills? How accurate is your inventory, etc. And of course, having all that accurate information leads to good quality business decisions. If I'm looking in the system and it's giving me a load of rubbish, I'm going to be making rubbish business decisions. So it's absolutely crucial. Focus on that. What about inventory replenishment? Well, there are very many different ways of replenishing inventory. We've got reorder points, we've got traditional MRP, we've got DRP, distribution requirements planning, we've got periodic review systems, we've got two-bin systems, we've got Kanban systems, and more recently, we've got the demand-driven materials requirements planning systems. So there are a lot of different rules and systems we can use. But when you look at every single SKU in your company, there are 4 questions that need to be answered for every single SKU. The first one is, how important is that SKU to you? Secondly, how are you going to manage it? So based on the importance of the item, you may manage it in a slightly different way. So if it's an A item, I might be managing it in a very important way, a very secure way. Whereas if it's a C-type item, maybe it's a mild steel washer, I'll be managing it in another way, maybe with a two-bin system. The third question we need to ask on every SKU is, when I order it, how many do I order at a time? What's the order quantity? Do I order 1 at a time? Do I order 10,000 at a time? What's the minimum order quantity that I order? And lastly, the fourth question is, hey, when do I place the order? Because if I place it too early, there's a chance I'm going to be overstocked and I could get obsolete material or material that goes past its sell-by date. Or if I order it too late, I could run out of stock. So it's a very important decision point when you actually order that stock. So those 4 questions: what's the importance of the item? How am I going to manage it? When I order it, how much do I order? And lastly, when do I actually place that order? Those are the 4 questions we need to ask for every SKU in your system. So what about measuring inventory? We need to have some good inventory measures, all right? Inventory turns is a very good one, or days of inventory. If you're a little way up the supply chain, manufacturing around there, you're probably talking about inventory turns. In other words, inventory comes into my system and I convert it into a finished product and then I sell it. What's the time between when the material comes in and when I sell that finished product? Okay. What time does that take? And I can work out the number of inventory turns that I might have in my business. So if I work out inventory turns, which is typically annual cost of goods sold divided by average inventory, and I get a figure of 2, it means that I'm turning my inventory over every 6 months. That means that material's coming into my business, and only 6 months later does it actually leave as a finished product to my customer. Now that's not very good, is it? That's not very good flow. And we have to finance that 6 months of having that material in our business. So we want to get the inventory turns up. I think in a lot of businesses, if you've got inventory turns of 12, that's not too bad. It means you're turning your inventory over every month. But in a car assembly plant, the wheels are the last thing that go on the car. And they come in the morning, they get put on the car, and the car drives off the production line in the afternoon. Their inventory turns are 365. It doesn't get any better than that. If you're down in the retail end, we often talk about days of inventory. In other words, I have some inventory and I've got an average daily usage for that inventory. How many days will that last before I run out if I don't get any more in? So that's another measure. But of course, days of inventory, I want to try and reduce, whereas inventory turns, I want to try and increase. And then things like write-offs. Do we have to write off inventory because it's gone past its sell-by date or it's obsolete? What about stock-outs, measuring how often you're stocked out? And then looking at what your perfect order might be and what the perfect order service might be in your business. We want to try and get that as high as possible. And people are achieving very high levels of customer service looking at demand-driven methodologies these days. Way up in the 98s, maybe even 100%. So worth having a look at demand-driven materials requirements planning as a methodology for replenishing inventory. Of course, we've got inventory all over the supply chain, and it's internal and it's external, and it all adds up to the cost, all this inventory within our supply chain. And then you may have heard of the bullwhip effect. And if you've ever played the MIT beer game, you'll understand how the bullwhip effect works. So at the end of the supply chain of the retail end, if you get a very small change in demand, by the time this has worked its way up through the supply chain, through the distribution supply chain, manufacturing suppliers, etc., you get this huge amplification of this bullwhip effect. Now, if you are interested in the bullwhip effect and how we mitigate it using demand-driven methodologies, on the 22nd of September, SAPICS is having a three-hour workshop, no 3-day, a 3-hour workshop. And you can find out more about that if you go onto the SAPICS website. Go to events, look for the 22nd of September, and you will find some information on that particular flow simulation workshop we're going to be doing. The first round will be with no buffers in the supply chain, and we'll see how that bullwhip effect ripples up the supply chain. And the second round of the game will put in some buffers, and you'll see how it mitigates that bullwhip effect and improves the customer service. So distribution network decisions as well we need to make. How are we going to manage the distribution network? Are we going to have it centralized or decentralized? And there are positives and negatives for each of those. We need to identify the essential resources that we need out there in the distribution network. And then it's about location. Where are we going to put those distribution warehouses and distribution centers and depots, etc.? And that can be an important decision that you need to make. And then a lot of companies, of course, are outsourcing their distribution, particularly if you're in manufacturing. You know, as they say, stick to your knitting. And you know how to make the product, but maybe distribution is not your forte. Get somebody else to do that for you. And a lot of companies are doing that now, outsourcing their distribution to 3PLs. Excess and obsolete inventory. I see it all over the place. I see it in my own kitchen. You know, when I look in the cupboards, 90% of the stuff we don't use, and it just clutters up. I don't know if you got one of those shelves in your cupboard, your kitchen, where you keep all the old ice cream buckets and plastic buckets, and you use one or two of them in the front. I don't even know what's at the back of that cupboard anymore. It can be like that in the warehouse. If we've got obsolete materials, get rid of it, because it just takes up valuable space for items that you need the space for. So very important to keep a clean warehouse. Get rid of that excess inventory and obsolete materials. And why do we have it? Because it was poorly managed. Maybe we didn't have the right stock rotation. And particularly if we've got fresh products like these lemons over here, we need to make sure that it's first in, first out. Make sure we've got that rotation working properly in our warehouse. Sometimes over purchasing. Sometimes I find in warehouses that we have a lot of excess material, and quite often it's because buyers don't want to get slapped on the wrist again because they ran out of stock, so they buy double to stay out of trouble. Okay, but then if it's a perishable product, it's just going to go bad, isn't it? And then of course maybe these customer returns. How do we handle those properly? So some causes of non-saleable materials. Well, incorrect use of materials handling equipment. One often sees forklift trucks damaging product in the warehouse because the guys don't understand how to handle it properly. We have items falling off shelves or being packed incorrectly. Heavy items being placed on lighter items or less sturdy items and damaging them. Packaging damage during offloading as well. So we've got to be careful when we offload or load trucks that we don't damage the product. Packaging damaged during stock counting processes, or at least parts damaged. I've seen parts getting damaged when the guys go in and do a stock take, they damage the product and then we have to throw it away. And then maybe even sabotage by disgruntled employees. So there are many causes of inventory becoming, getting into a state that we can't really sell it anymore. Also make sure that you're in the right environment. I work with a fishing company once, and they had a spare parts store, which was right on the quayside, a very corrosive atmosphere. And when you looked at a lot of the parts in that warehouse, they were corroded. They were not usable because the environment had damaged them in some way. They weren't looked after properly. And but if you look in the computer system, it said, "Oh no, we got one. We got a good one." But when you go down and look at it, it's not usable because it's been damaged due to the environment in which it's being kept. Lastly, teams. We need to have the right teams, shared leadership, we need accountability, we need to focus on our strengths, compromise, focus on team development. So particularly in a warehouse environment, we need to have a good team environment within the warehouse, but within our own organizations as well. So teams and the development of teams is pretty critical, isn't it? But of course, our teams must conform to the safety, and working in a warehouse can be dangerous. We don't want to look at safety and also quality of the processes that we have and the quality of the people that we have within our warehouse. We must also focus on costs because, as we said, keeping inventory is expensive, and we need to understand what those costs are and try and keep them to a minimum. And then, of course, delivery, we must make sure that we can deliver on time to our customers. So all the time, we need to be looking at our teams. We need to be motivating our teams. We need to be strengthening our teams. And we need to be looking at those group dynamics. And of course, there's 4 stages of group dynamics. I'm not going to go into any detail here, but we have courses that go into this, or we go into this in these courses. And then we need to strengthen the teams. So it's about people, isn't it? It's about people having the right educated, trained people, most empowered people, looking after your most valuable asset. Not only looking after it, but managing it, planning it, purchasing it, looking after it, issuing it, and finally distributing it out to your customers. So we need the best educated, best trained people looking after most valuable asset, which is your inventory. And I'll say it again, inventory is your business. And you need to make sure you got the right inventory at the right place at the right time, right quality to satisfy the customer demand. So tying up all these elements means better inventory levels and reducing costs, quality products and goods prices equals happy customers. Remember, we don't only want happy customers, we want delighted customers. And to understand the role of inventory and inventory control and replenishment, then SAPEX has some endorsed inventory leader type courses in which you can attend. So that's my story for this afternoon. We've got a few minutes for questions. Shanti or Cindy, have we got any questions?
I haven't seen any questions, Ken, in the chat. Is there anyone on the conversation or on the call who has any specific questions? While we're waiting for questions, just a reminder, this is just an introduction to a course that we do offer a full course in. So if this all sounded a little bit confusing and it's something you need to know more about, don't forget to go into the SAPEX website. Claire, if you can just drop the website into the chat, that would be great, so that everybody has it. And on the website, you will find all the information you need for these e-learning courses. But I don't see any questions, and I also don't see any hands up. So I am assuming that that is meaning that there's no questions. Ken, a huge thank you from all of us. Ah, there we go.
Pleasure.
Something.
Yeah, question.
Thank you.
Oh.
So yes, Ken, a huge thank you from all of us at SAPEX. We really do appreciate your wisdom and the fact that you're so willing to share with us. And my family has literally just arrived home, so it's going mad in the background. But thank you to everyone who joined. If you have any further questions on the process, please make sure that you dial into our website. Okay, I'm going to mute now because it's chaos.
Yeah, I don't know whether anybody heard my dogs whining during the presentation there, but thanks everybody for attending. And I must go and land my helicopter now. I'm running out of fuel and get off home. So keep well, and if we can help you with anything to do with inventory and inventory planning, the next one's going to be on the 14th of August. We're going to be talking about planning and forecasting in your manufacturing business. So register for that one. So it's the 14th of October at 3 o'clock again. So see you again in about a month's time. So keep well, and if we can help, give us a call. All right. Cheers.
Thanks, Ken. Thanks, everybody. And thank you for joining us.